And in this session, we'll be looking at learning and teaching. Now, at the end of this session, you should be able to explain the major features of Piagetian theory, state the most relevant stages for science education, explain what Ausubel said about constructivism, and finally, state the four conditions for conceptual change as proposed by Posner. So let's look at Piaget's theory. Now, in 1921, Jean Piaget propounded a four-stage model of child development and learning. And his underlying notion was that there is increasing complexity or sophistication in learning as the child undergoes mental, emotional, and physical changes. So what Jean Piaget means to say is, as a child grows or with maturation, the child builds a cognitive structure, and this structure is able to allow him or her to undertake a task that will increase in sophistication, and this task will also be over and above the experience of an earlier stage. And the four stages of child development, according to Jean Piaget, are the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. Now, at the sensory motor stage, Piaget is of the view that at this stage, the child uses sensory and motor ability to form concepts about the world around him or her, and the child is also able to gain understanding of his or her environment through a direct interaction. So as the child interacts with his or her environment, he or she is able to gain an understanding of the environment. And at the pre-operational stage, here the child responds to objects and events as they appear. And the child is also able to develop the ability to represent the various objects, the various events symbolically. And so this time they are able to understand the objects because they have a symbolic representation of the object in them. And at the concrete operational stage, according to Piaget, at this stage, the child is able to do a bit of abstract activity. So the child is able to do a bit of logical reasoning, a bit of problem solving. But the child will need experiences, better experiences, in order for him or her to do this logical reason. And the final stage of Piaget's theory is the formal operational stage. And this is the stage that the child is now fully developed, or there is growth in the child's cognitive structure. And because the child's cognitive structures are developed, the child is able to now develop abstract conceptual thinking. The child is able to do critical thinking. The child is able to do problem solving, all at the formal operational stage. Now, in the 60s and the 70s, science teachers have looked to Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and their research focused on two major features of Piaget's theory. And the first was that Piaget proposed that learning occurs through an individual's interaction with the environment. So as the child interacts with the environment, the child is able to get a mental representation of the various objects that he or she interacts. And this interaction, according to Piaget, is described as students assimilating new information and ideas from various educational experiences, as well as the accommodation of the new information with previously held information. So what do we mean by assimilation of new information and ideas? So what this means is that the child is being presented with new information. The child now finds out that the new information is better or gives a better explanation to what he or she already has. And so the child has to drop the old way of doing and now take in the new way. So example can be that a child may be using the left hand to always take an item from somebody. And this child in the school be taught that to take or receive something from somebody, it is good or it is right for you to use your right hand. It is not good to be using the left. So now the child has to do away with using the left hand to take an item and now take in the new information, which is now using your right hand to take an item or object from somebody. And with the accommodation of new information, here the child now adds more information to what he or she already has. So we know that in our various homes, we may be using a language or a means of communication which is different from what we use in school. And so when the child gets to school, you realize that in school maybe we are using English as a means of communication, but in the house, the child is using a Ghanaian language. Here, the child will now add the English language, which is also a means of communication, to his previously held information, which is the Ghanaian language that he or she has been using in the house. So, and the second is each individual passes through different stages of development, and these stages are characterized by the ability to perform various cognitive tasks. So, with the stages, that is the sensory motor stage, there is a task that the child can perform at the pre-operational, at the concrete operational, as well as the formal operational. All these stages are characterized by various forms of cognitive tasks. And the most relevant stages for science education, because physics is at the senior high school, and so the most relevant stage of Piaget's theory to our physics teaching and learning is the concrete reasoning or the concrete operational and the formal reasoning stage or the formal operational stage. And a formal reasoner, we saw, can manipulate abstract ideas and concepts, but with the concrete reasoner, the concrete reasoner will require tangible objects and experiences and their observable relations in order to reason logically. Now let's look at constructivism. And with constructivism in their model, they are of the view that students construct knowledge by interpreting new experiences in the context of their prior knowledge, experiences, episodes, as well as image. And the theoretical basis for constructive research comes from several sources, including the works of David Ausubel. And according to Ausubel, he is of the view that a learner's prior knowledge is an important factor in determining what is learned in a given situation. So you remember that anytime we want to start teaching in the classroom, we first of all review students' previous knowledge, because there is that relationship between what the learner already knows and what you are about to present to the learner. And another proponent is Vygotsky. And to Vygotsky, there are student conceptions as well as teachers' conceptions. And for that reason, students and teachers might use similar words to describe concepts, yet they will have different personal interpretations of these concepts. And so what Vygotsky's work implies is science instruction should take into account the differences between the teacher and the student's conception. And it should also provide a great deal of student-student interaction so that learners can develop concepts from those whose understanding and interpretations are closer to their own. So you realize that as students try to give meaning or interpretation to the various concepts, you find out that their interpretations are related. We must provide them the opportunity, those with similar views, to come together in order to arrive at a conclusion. What are the conditions for conceptual change? What are the conditions for conceptual change? And Posner and others have proposed 4 conditions for conceptual change. And these conditions are, the first of them is that in order for students to change their conceptions of a given phenomena, they must be dissatisfied with their current conception. And their current conception that they must be dissatisfied with is what some do refer to as the misconceptions or the alternative conceptions. Others refer to it as alternative frameworks or naive theories. Students should be dissatisfied with their naive theories or with their misconceptions. And this dissatisfaction comes about through their repeated exposure to experiences they cannot explain by using their current conception. And secondly, the new conception must be intelligible in terms of what the learners already know. So they must find sense, they must find reason in the new conception that is being presented to them. And thirdly, the new conception must be plausible in that it can explain a number of prior experiences and observations. So the new conception must be as credible as possible so that it can help the learners to understand their prior experiences. And finally, the new conception must be fruitful, in that it must open up new areas of inquiry, primarily through predictions about future events. And so these are the four conditions that Posner proposed that they can be effective for change in students' conceptions. Now, students, in this session, we looked at the Piagetian theory and we saw the major features of his theory, and we also looked at the conditions for conceptual change. Now, as we bring the session to an end, let us take this question. What was Vygotsky's view of constructivism with regard to teachers and students' conception? Let's try and get answer to this and present our answer in the next